Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a quick little parts list look at what a moderately priced, sort of entry level, but with plenty of upgradability gaming rig would cost. So we're going to go through the PC part picker list. All those links and everything will be in the description down below for your convenience if you want to go and buy those parts, but let's hop right to it. Okay, to get started here, we're gonna jump right over to the parts list, and you can sort of keep your mind set with this. This is a sub $700 PC that these parts are for, and I'll go through some of the cost-saving measures that we've gone through, just so we can sort of keep that price point down. But I was trying to bear in mind that this PC does sort of give you some upgrade paths. And I'll sort of point out some of the things that I would change to make it a little bit more expensive, but you might want to consider doing a couple edits to this especially if you really want to upgrade this down the road and you know you're already planning those upgrades for when you have the money and you just sort of want to build the base computer to get started. So let's hop right over to the parts list. First up, this is a computer that's powered by an Intel Core i3-6100. This is the locked SKU of this, so this is not a K part. You cannot overclock this processor. It does come with a base clock of 3.7 gigahertz. And of course, being an i3, it also has hyper-threading, so you're getting those 4 logical cores, even if there are only 2 physical cores, and that should give you plenty of power for powering games at 1080p. I don't anticipate this computer being used for much in the way of 1440p or 4K gaming. So if we hop over to the Newegg site, it is a Skylake-based processor. Already mentioned it's 3.7 gigahertz on that LGA 1151 socket. The next part in this list, and by the way, this will run you, according to PC Part Picker, you can pick it up for $110. And of course, the places that you'll have to shop around for these to get these prices vary. So if you're deciding you're going to do everything on Amazon or everything on Newegg or something like that, you're going to pay a little bit more in the end, because for this low price, you sort of have to do a little shopping around, and of course you should already know that if you've ever used PC Part Picker before. But I just brought the Newegg links because it's very easy for me to go through these parts. The motherboard that will support this processor is the Gigabyte GA-H110M-A Revision 1. And the reason I went with this board is very simple. It is $50. Since we are not doing any overclocking here, basically I'm looking for just a board that supports the CPU and gives us at least that one PCIe slot, which obviously pretty much every modern motherboard does that. Things I like about this motherboard is that it has 2 PCIe by 1 slots. And the reason I like that is because we're going with a double wide card for our graphics card, but that still leaves us open one of those slots that we can put in maybe a wireless card if we would like to go that route. Unfortunately, this does only come with 2 DDR4 RAM slots, and I'll be talking about that here in a minute as one of the things that you might want to change as well. But it gives us enough SATA connection that we will have our base drive, and then we can always add drives later on. Pretty simple board, pretty basic. Because it's the H110 chipset, it's going to save us a little bit of money over that Z170 because it does not offer overclocking, but since we have a processor that does not require or doesn't even allow overclocking, it makes sense to do it that way. Now, if you do anticipate upgrading to maybe an i5 6600K sometime down the road, or just an unlocked version of some processor, obviously you'd want to swap out this motherboard for a Z170 motherboard that's going to give you overclocking options for that eventual upgrade. Just something to keep in mind as you consider building out these types of computers. Next up is going to be our RAM. This is the next thing I want to mention. I picked a kit of 2 4GB RAM sticks. Now that fills both of our DIMMs in our motherboard. If, again, you feel like you're going to upgrade to 16 gigabytes later on, what you want to do is go with one 8 gig stick now and then one 8 gig stick later on that matches it. And the price premium you pay for the one 8 gig versus the 2 4 gigs is not really a big deal. So in all reality, it wouldn't be a bad idea just to pick up an 8 gig stick now instead of later. But if you never plan on really upgrading this PC down the road, 2 4 gig sticks is the way to go because you can run those in dual channel. And I like the rip jaws because they look really, really good. They have a heat spreader on them, which should help with any sort of heat issues. You may be able to overclock these a little bit if you, again, have that chipset that supports the overclocking. But these do a great job. They have great reviews. G-Skill's a solid company for RAM, so A+ on that. For storage, I went with a single 480 gig SSD. This is the ADATA SP550. I use several different SKUs of this. I have a couple 240s and a 480 gig ADATA SP550 in some of my own computers. The reason I use these is because they give you SSD performance and they're super, super cheap. They are on the low end of SSDs from reputable companies. I like them because they give me that boost in speed, but they don't give you crazy performance. They're definitely a huge step up over a hard drive though, so I definitely still recommend them. Especially for a budget computer like this, it makes sense to go with budget SSDs. Next up is our graphics card. I went with the RX 480. You may want to go with a GTX 1060, or between the two of them, frankly, I would go with whichever one you have availability for. Now, you'll notice on the PC Part Picker list, it has this card listed at $240, and here on Newegg, it is a $400 card. The reason for that is simply availability. These things are not widely available in most places. Now, a month or so ago, I was able to actually pick one up on Prime Day during Amazon for the listed price of $240, and that was for my brother's computer build, and those quickly were out of stock. So for the RX 480 or the 1060s, basically you have to keep your eyes out for those. The chances are you may not be able to find them day one of looking, but be vigilant, keep looking for them. That would be one of the first parts I try to find if I were you building, and just check daily, and maybe you'll get lucky. You might have to pay a slight premium to get your hands on one, but just check often, and you should be able to eventually find one of those without a huge waiting period. Next up is going to be our case. Now, the case is something that in a budget rig, I never recommend spending any money on because you're trying to keep costs down, and one of the easiest ways to do that is through the case. Now, I picked the Rosewill Ranger M. There are several Rosewill cases based on the exact same internal layout with just the outer panels changed. I like this one because it gives you a lot of airflow if you need it. Also, it supports, I won't say it supports all, but it supports some 120 millimeter all-in-one radiators. And the only reason I know this is because I've ran one in one of these before. And here's the thing I like about this internal layout that Rosewill has going that not all these small micro ATX cases have. Down at the bottom, typically you see a hard drive cage, which limits the length of your graphics card. That is not the case in this particular case. So you have your hard drive mounting solution, which is right below the DVD drive bays, which, by the way, I only use the DVD drive bays to stuff excess cables if you have a semi-modular or a non-modular power supply, because I don't use those bays anymore, although you can find adapters to turn those into additional hard drive bays, just something to keep in mind. But the way I did mine, and it's actually behind me, and you can actually sort of see it over my shoulder here, is on the floor of it, I just use some double-sided tape to mount my SSD that keeps it long out of the way. You can actually mount a 120 millimeter all-in-one radiator up front if you eventually go that route. Cable management is awful in this case. There's no room behind the motherboard tray, hardly at all, to get any of the cables out of the way. But again, we're going for that budget build, and knowing the airflow within the case being cluttered by cables is not actually that big a thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Linus Tech Tips has a great video on cable clutter and how it affects airflow with the case. And the basic conclusion is it really doesn't affect the airflow through the case all that much. So the fact that it doesn't have great cable management doesn't bother me a whole lot. It does come with 2 fans pre-mounted for you. I replaced both those fans just because I wanted to, but they do the job that you need them to do. And then obviously you'll have your heatsink fan, so that would be a total of 3 fans total in your case, plus the GPU fan if you want to throw that on there. Which is also another reason, this case is another reason that I like the RX 480, because it has that blower style fan, which is going to take any air in the case and blow it out the back instead of just recirculating it into this small case. It's also worth noting that there is if you notice with this picture, there is this grill It's going to be right by the GPU, which will at least allow the GPU to pull in maybe a little bit of fresh air. But realistically, this front fan is going to blow in enough air for everything in your case. This type of build is not going to run overly hot. Last part that we want to go through is the power supply. I picked, again, going Rosewell. By the way, they are in no way affiliated, obviously, because if you look at my subscriber count, they don't care about my channel, at least yet. The Rosewell, I'm going to call it Valence 500. It's a 500 watt power supply. Thing I like about it is that it is, I believe, semi-modular. Could be wrong on that. I am completely wrong on that. It is a non-modular power supply, although I could have sworn that the one I put in the PC part picker list was a... Anyways, does not matter. Here's the keys with this. It gives you support for that graphics card, which pretty much every power supply at this point has support for an RX 480 because it only requires one 6-pin connector, and it'll give you enough upgradability with the headroom that you have for the total wattage for things like additional drives down the road, or even a DVD-ROM if you want to stuff that in there for an extra $20. It's going to give you plenty of headroom with your power draw, and it's also 80 plus gold certified, so you don't have to worry about efficiency or anything. It's going to be a good solid power supply. It has solid reviews across the board, which is what I look for in a power supply. It's going to serve this computer just fine. So if we go back to this parts list, all those parts combined will give you solid performance, solid gaming performance, and I call this the August 2016 1080p killer because, or destroyer rather, because for this cost, it is going to do a great job of playing 1080p games. The last thing I wanted to mention is I threw in, for the operating system, a Windows key will run you about $30. The place I always go for those is either G2A or Kingwin.net because you can get those keys. They're full keys, but you can get them for usually between $25 and $35 for Windows 10 Pro. It's better than paying full retail. Or better yet, if you have a key laying around that's not being used in another computer, you can get that transferred and save yourself $30, pushing this build down to about $330, rather $630 total. Alright guys, that's it from Hoosier Hardware today. If you like these types of build videos where I go through parts and give you some ideas for your own builds, go ahead and hit that like button down below, also that subscribe button because it helps me out a ton. Also, you can find me on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. So until the next video, see ya.